Hey ARKS Ops, Silhouette here once again, this time with information on Buster Quests and PSO2. Buster Quests? Those came out ages ago, I hear you saying. Well, yes, you are correct. Buster Quests came out roughly 3 weeks ago, but with the advent of the new urgent quest, Castrum Demonica Hostility, there's never been a better time for a refresher on these quests and your role in them. So in a way, I'm right on time. Buster Quests are essentially a refined version of everyone's favorite mining-based urgent quest, where your team of 8 players is tasked with managing both the defense of your towers and leading the assault against the large and in-charge Castrum Demonica, a large golem with a castle-like appearance that can summon other monsters. To do this, you're given a number of tools at your disposal, with each tower having a defensive layout of shields, barriers, turrets, traps, and autoguns, and more, based on the coordinator in charge of them and their decisions. Normally, these quests are isolated in their own unique subquest section of the subquest counter, but with the new urgent quest, you'll more than likely be seeing quite a few players dropping into them with or without the experience of waiting in that queue. They're a fun set of quests, even if you sometimes run into the occasional glitch where the castle isn't interested in attacking you, and you get to take pictures with your team instead. While it isn't unique to them, Buster Quests absolutely place a great deal of importance on your synergy with your team, and your knowledge of how to best apply yourself in these quests. This isn't your traditional find boss and DPS boss encounter, so you'll need to be strategic, quick-footed, and thinking ahead while battling it out, especially if you want to get full marks and increase your efficiency while grinding for rare items. So, with that said, let's get into it. First and foremost, if you haven't yet for whatever reason, Buster Quests will need to be unlocked by progressing the Episode 5 story. It's really simple, you just have to go and play up until you get into and complete your first story Buster Quest. They're not that difficult, the enemies are very low level, and even if you can't find anyone to play with, you should have no problem pushing right through. Once you've done that, Buster Quest should now be available to you from the subquest menu. It's worth noting that the urgent quest Castrum Demonica Hostility does not require you to unlock Buster Quests, but you should probably still do so anyways, as they are good experience, a unique sort of battle, and can be a good source of drops and weekly star gems via Buster Metal exchanges, among other things. There are 3 match options for Buster Quests: Main Match Advanced, otherwise known as Grade 3+, and Free Matches. Buster Quests have a sort of scale based on the Buster points of the members of your party, where the enemies in opposition either weaken or grow stronger based on the lowest member's Buster points. These different difficulty options account for that. Free Match is the easiest, with it being grades between 1 and 2 always, and only ever requires level 10 main class in order to join. There used to be a stamina system in the JP version, and Free Match was the way to replenish that stamina so you could continue doing Buster Quests. But that isn't in use here. For those of you rocking 90/90 characters with your in-game gear, scoffing at the idea of playing Free Match with all these new players, please note that completing a Free Match gives you an additional 100% try boost for your next 2 Buster Quests of any level, which is good for just about everyone. Main Match is next, and can scale up to Grade 3, which is the approximately normal mode of difficulty. This requires at least a main class level of level 40, and is where you'll probably spend a chunk of your time building up your Buster points before moving on to Main Match Advanced. Main Match Advanced has the best rewards, and requires a main class and a subclass of 80 at least. This one can be tough, and requires you to be very active and contributing, as things can get out of hand very quickly if you do not. For the record, the urgent quest on Extremely Hard is roughly in the same class or higher as Main Match Advanced, although there are some differences, notably 2 guaranteed Omega Hunau spawns, as well as level 80 mobs. Once you're in a match, you'll immediately be greeted with one of 3 different castle types, and as long as you're grade 2 or higher, a notification as to whether you're defense coordinator for a specific tower or not. The castle types matter only after the wall is broken by your Buster Rams, so we'll get to them later. Onto the defenses, however, should you be chosen as a coordinator, it basically means that you're able to decide between 4 different defense layouts of armaments and barriers for the tower you're assigned to. These come in 4 varieties, with some of them being more useful than others, oftentimes depending on which specific tower they're applied to. Balanced, Attack, Defense, and Special. As you can see, there's quite a difference between each of them, so let's break down their actual implements to give you an idea of what you're in for. Slowing traps are large lane-wide pads that do exactly what they say on the tin, Enemies walk over them and are slowed down. Force barriers are your go-to shields, obstructing not only enemy movement, but their attacks as well. Gatling and shotgun turrets are automated defenses that fire whenever an enemy is directly in front of them, with the Gatling turrets having a longer range, but being weaker than the shotgun. Photon laser guns are your traditional photon beam manual turrets that you have seen before. The telepipe cannon allows you to fire a teleporter endpoint, connecting the cannon and the target area with a two-way teleporter with limited uses. The Photon Punisher is your howitzer, an artillery type that allows you to target a wide area, charge the blast, and pretty much wipe out anything in that area. Finally, we have the Freezing Barrier, which returns from Mining Base. Once activated, a cold barrier freezes all enemies in close proximity to the tower it's on. Note, this only freezes enemies along with destroying ephemera cores that spawn on towers. It does not block attacks like the Force Barrier. All of these defenses have limited uses, and you can get more by collecting mana throughout the battle. That said, you'll notice some pretty big disparities between them all. Personally speaking, while none of these are particularly damning, and you can succeed with any combination, attack specifically tends to be one of the more limited or vulnerable layouts. For one, it has no force barriers, which are useful at higher difficulties and for dealing with waves of enemies or projectiles in a pinch. And it also has no freezing barriers, meaning you'll need to manually DPS down ephemera cores that appear on your buster towers. On top of that, attack's armaments are very deep in your enemy spawns, and the enemies move pretty quickly. They can help thin the herd of oncoming enemies in the two center lanes, but there will always be enemies that can easily bypass these auto turrets. Along with that, the outer lane has spawn points for enemies past where these turrets are, which makes them even less useful there. While some popular voices mention the freezing barriers as the huge no-sell point, they're frankly not that important. Ephemera cores don't take that much damage to deal with so long as you're properly geared for this fight and aren't slacking off. It's just the complete lack of defenses and how far forward the attack implements are that can make the layout difficult to use properly, as it works best on the center towers, and even then requires a good bit more attention than others. Special isn't as bad, but isn't much better. Hardly anyone uses the manual turrets, but at least you get the one force barrier and the freezing barrier. Personally, I recommend the defense layout, as you get two shields, giving you multiple chances to catch waves if necessary, a freezing barrier to deal with ephemera cores, the telepipe cannon to get around quickly, and slowing traps to give you plenty of time to decide and act. Balanced is a decent alternative if you really just want that Photon Punisher to play with. I specifically recommend using Defense or Balanced on the green tower, as the shields can easily intercept Omega Hunau's, and he almost always seems to go for the green tower's lane initially, which is the center right one. Prior to the battle, and throughout it, your secondary interest when not defending towers or attacking is to collect mana that spawns around the field. In Buster Quests, you'll have dash panels to assist you, but in Urgent Quests, you will not. Collecting mana recharges your uses on your various defenses and causes more Buster Rams to spawn during the attack phase, so it's always advisable to pick them up when you're not immediately occupied. Mana will also heal your Buster Towers and recover their HP, otherwise there is no way to do so. Next, onto the battle itself. These encounters have a series of phases, the first of which is called Defense, where you're defending your Buster Towers from waves of enemies and the machinations of the Castrum Demonica itself. Buster, where you are tasked with escorting Buster Rams toward the wall to break one of the ARKS Demonicas, the supporting towers of the castle wall, one per ram. Attack, whereby once the walls are down, you move in to attack the castle directly. And Accidents, which aren't really phases, but are more like variations of defense phases. These phases tend to rotate in the order of Defense, Buster, and Attack, until the walls are down and the first attack phase is completed, at which point, the Castrum Demonica throws you back into the field and you move to the final set of defense and attack phases. As soon as the battle starts, you're thrown into a defense phase. These phases are characterized by moving from lane to lane to defend the towers from hordes of enemies incoming. It can be difficult to try and cover the entire battlefield by yourself, so I'd personally recommend taking a more level approach. Pick 2 or 3 lanes and kind of make sure they're handled. By making use of shields and implements of these lanes, you can stymie just about any charge on your towers and either eliminate the hostiles or hold them off until help comes. While it is good to be able to eliminate a lot of monsters on your own, remember that this isn't a deathmatch. Your top priority is to keep your towers from taking any damage if possible, and if not, as little damage as possible. Some top priorities during this phase: towers on the map other than your buster towers, denoted by red dots on the map, will eventually grow and begin firing a powerful laser at the designated tower. These can appear anywhere on the field, even behind your own buster towers. Destroy these ASAP, as they can do tremendous damage if left unchecked, purely by nature of them constantly doing tick damage. It generally only takes 1 or 2 sufficiently geared characters to take them down, so make sure you don't pile on and waste resources. Next, ephemera cores are these blooming red flowers that spawn on the towers, sapping them and dealing damage consistently. You can usually tell when one is about to appear by the red pentagon that appears encapsulating the tower on the minimap, as well as the red pulsing glow around it on the field. Using a freezing barrier instantly destroys these ephemera cores, although they don't have that much HP, and a sufficiently geared individual can destroy them in 1 to 3 attacks. Lastly, the Castrum Demonica can sometimes get in on the fight as well. It has a number of attacks it can perform during the defense phase, ranging from summoning a giant fist to loom over and eventually attack some of your defenses, summoning a wave of missiles to slowly approach and attack your towers, launching a turret that fires dark waves at the towers and nearby players, similar to Fal's Hunal's burst attack, and finally, throwing large explosive boulders at each of the 4 towers simultaneously, similar to Fal's Renza's. All of these attacks can be destroyed by players before they have a chance to do damage, and should be, in all possible cases. The fist can remove defenses permanently, which is awful, and the rest of these can deal great damage to your towers, so get moving and get rid of them. At the beginning of defense phases, including the first one at the start of the encounter, higher grades have a chance of spawning an Omega Hunal. The Urgent Quest in particular always does. Omega Hunal spawns occur in the center of the map, with 4 large Fal's Fists spawning and traveling to each tower. These do tremendous damage if they hit, so players will need to intercept them and destroy them as they fly toward the towers. During this time, Hunal and several waves of monsters will spawn and begin approaching as well. Believe it or not, the force barriers can also block Hunal's approach and attacks, allowing you to dedicate less resources to him overall, since he won't immediately be a danger to the tower. In my experience, he 100% of the time snaps to the middle right green tower if he's not intercepted by a player before then. By having a defense layout on this tower, you can block him with the forward shield and even let the shotgun take a few shots at him while you deal with oncoming monsters in another lane, or the flying fist heading towards the tower, or just take a moment to get a grasp on the situation across the map. Common enemies largely deal negligible damage per hit to towers, but enough of them can cause a lot of damage in the short term. Some of them also have quite a few unique capabilities and are worth mentioning. The Skeletal Reapers can teleport, bypassing your defenses, requiring you to take them down manually. Golems, Salamanders, Barrel Orcs, and Bomber de Gashes had projectile attacks that can deal damage from further away, and can deal decent damage, so either block them or kill them quickly. The outer 2 towers also are uniquely vulnerable to spawns that attack from the sides of the laning, which bypass any shields or defenses, either partially or wholly, so keep an eye out for that unique hurdle. Once you've cleared the defense phase, you're on to the buster phase. In this phase, you'll have another short preparation period where you should be gathering mana before the buster rams spawn. The amount of buster rams that spawn is directly based on the amount of mana your team has recovered throughout the battle, with the maximum of 4. But with most teams, you'll probably see 2 buster rams during your first buster phase. Escort and guard these rams, as hordes of enemies will spawn to intercept them, and they'll soon be under fire from not only those guys, but the towers and even the Castrum Demonica itself from time to time. For the record, you can climb on and ride these buster rams, which is fun, and good for rangers with a class skill that requires them to stand still. Once you've held off the waves long enough, the buster ram will rise into the air and take out one of the supporting towers or ARKS Demonicas of the castle wall. If all ARKS Demonica towers are destroyed, the castle wall will come down, and then you will move right into the attack phase. If not, you'll move back to the defense phase, which you'll need to clear again to get to another buster phase. Sometimes EX phases can occur, where you'll get another try of the current phase. These are random and cannot be relied upon, but should be capitalized upon to speed up your progress. Buster phases are relatively straightforward, but there is one special note that I should mention. Sometimes, you will spawn more Buster Rams than the towers left on the wall. In these cases, each Buster Ram will generally attack the nearest tower, but all towers will be targeted by at least one ram. This means, you will sometimes have 2 rams attacking one tower. In these cases, it is especially important for you to identify which Buster Rams need to be protected. Yes, ideally, you should protect them all, but sometimes that is easier said than done. The reason this comes up is because it can get really easy for, say, the majority of your team to be focused on defending 2 rams while leaving the last one vulnerable. More than a few times, that vulnerable ram that gets destroyed ends up being the one ram you needed to attack the other tower, while the remaining 2 towers are attacking the same tower, leaving the other one left over. Just be mindful of it, you only need 1 ram to hit each tower. All the extras are just that, extra. The attack phase is just as straightforward as the Buster phase, if not more so. It's very simple. The wall crumbles, providing you a path to the Castrum Demonica itself. Rush up the stairs and past the enemies, dodging the attacks as you need to in order to confront the castle golem itself and attack its core. During this time, it only really alternates between 2 or 3 attack patterns, sometimes swinging its fists around, sometimes slamming them down, making a little wave pattern. Dodge these attacks, and just keep hammering on the core. Eventually it will pop, AoE any approaching minor enemies, the core should fall. Once it does, you'll be thrown out of the Castrum Demonica's court and back into the field, and it will erect a barrier to keep you from re-entering. At this point, you've entered the final defense phase. In the final defense phase, the type of Castrum Demonica you're dealing with comes into play. Swordy boys will summon a giant sword and chuck it into the center of the field. Destroy this ASAP, as it will eventually charge up and destroy all of your Buster Towers, instantly failing the mission. Casty boys will raise their hands into the sky and will summon 4 demon turrets in front of each of your Buster Towers. As mentioned before, don't let those sit around there for too long. And finally, Big O looking boy will spin his little pistons around and then poke them under the barrier and begin charging up a very large beam weapon. This one is a bit more complex, strategically, as you really only need to dedicate 1 or 2 players to run up and destroy the cannons, while the rest need to attend to the field, which will already be spawning enemy waves. These cannons aren't particularly difficult for players to destroy who are confident in their class and gear, but if they are left alive too long, the beams will begin to sweep across their Buster Towers, dealing incredible damage. Take them down. In Final Defense, there is a chance for another Omega Hunau to spawn along with his 4 Fists of Doom, and in the urgent quest, Hostility, it is again a guaranteed spawn. The same trick works as before. You can catch him on the shield if you have charges left on the green tower. Just make sure to distract him so he doesn't wail on your towers directly too much. The only other notation is that the Final Defense tends to be a bit more hectic. More waves, more towers, and generally more interference from the boss can occur. It's also where you seem to have the most common time for accident subphases to occur, which again are just notable variations in defense phases. These can include some more Omega Hunau spawns, the Castrum Demonica doing its thing and throwing out more junk at your towers, or even the spawning of a large wall to separate lanes. The wall specifically can be passed through, but the red areas can cause you to be afflicted with status effects like panic, so they'll need to be destroyed to make travel between these lanes easier. More importantly, however, they do not do any real damage on their own, so just make sure to defend your Buster Towers as the top priority, and deal with the walls whenever your lane is clear. They're a bit meaty, so just be careful to not get too distracted by them when you have enemies incoming towards a tower. It is worth noting that some users have stated that a charge punishment knuckle from Elder Form Dark Blast can instantly jib a wall at full charge. I've never done it, but if you're okay with using your Elder at that point and have the skill powered up, give it a shot. Once you've finished defending your towers, it is time to move on to the final attack phase. In this, you'll run towards the Castrum Demonica, but instead head up the ramps on each side and begin fighting your way up the ramparts. If you're in the urgent quest, the lack of dash panels means a movement photon art or the telepipe cannons will be your best friend for closing the gap quickly. Telepipe cannons can also be used in Buster Quests for the same purpose, so that's cool. The reason you want to be fast in this phase is because the Castrum Demonica will begin attacking your Buster Towers directly with powerful lasers every 30 seconds. It truly is the final deathmatch between your team and it. Try to keep an even number of players on each side of the castle, as the progression up the castle ramparts is double gated, with each gate being unlocked by clearing enemies on each side of the ramparts. This means if one side has fewer players and a more difficult time progressing, neither side will be able to progress until both do. Once you pass the second gate, you have a choice between climbing up to destroy one of the artillery towers or attacking the boss directly. Personally, I would not recommend sending more than 1 or 2 people to deal with the artillery tower, as they go down relatively quick, and the boss could always use more DPS. Fighting the boss itself is relatively easy. He makes a number of large telling attacks, and all you really need to do is attack the orange cores in its wrists until they're destroyed. When the majority of players are attacking, this is child's play, and sooner or later you'll have destroyed both of its wrists. Climb up the golem's arm and attack its head until it dies, with your only opposition at this point being an ineffectual sky laser. Lay it on them, and you'll be childing King Me in no time. Castles are terrible at checkers after all. With this, you should be as prepared as you possibly can be to take on any number of Buster Quests and Castrum Demonicas, and you should have plenty of reason to. The experience is good, loot is wonderful with 13-star supernatural weapons and even some 14-star demonia weapons, and Buster medals being earned for each quest you finish are a great plus. We'll eventually see another Buster Quest UQ, Perpetual Madness, which will be a bit different from these, but for now, there's never been a better time to go wreck up the place. So go ahead, go topple a castle or two. Good luck, ARKS Ops. And that's it, guys. I hope you're enjoying your Buster Quests. It really is a unique sort of encounter, and personally, I find them to be a lot of fun. Good for leveling, too. I hope this guide helps you in some way, and that your runs go well. If it does, or if you're just a really cool person, consider liking this video and subscribing. I intend to keep these coming, even if they're late here and there. At the end of the day, I'm just putting these out because I figure someone somewhere is going to want some pointers. And even those who are veterans in their own right can stand a review every now and then. Shoutouts to my Alliance Affirm for once again running a number of these encounters with me, as well as many players we met along the way. I'm Silhouette, and I'm signing off. May you have all the rare drops.